And people ask me, why do we make such a big deal out of Veterans Day? And I can only tell you why it's a big deal to me. As a guy who went to combat 3 times, as a soldier who served 24 years, first as an infantryman and a ranger, and then as a physician in special operations, I can just tell my stories. And that's how I think about the importance of Veterans Day. Why we make such a big deal out of Veterans Day. Well, I will tell you that when I reported to the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, I met a guy greeted me, and his name was Corey, and Corey was shot 7 times during Operation Anaconda in the battle for Roberts Ridge. We had a Navy SEAL that fell off of a helicopter, and they sent in a rescue team to get him, and they were ambushed and stranded on a mountain, Roberts Ridge, named after the SEAL. And Corey was shot 7 times. He continued to give medical aid to the wounded until he passed out due to blood loss. He survived, he was recovering, and I report in to this guy to see him. Well, what's interesting about Corey is when I flew into to Iraq just a few months later, guess who was sitting next to me? Corey. Think of the courage that it takes to go to combat, but think of the courage that it takes to go back after you've been shot 7 times. And it's that courage that is every veteran has, every soldier has. That's why we make such a big deal out of Veterans Day, that courage. And I'm reminded of a story, a guy by the name of Rob. Rob had already passed his retirement. He was a Delta operator. He was a sniper for Delta. And he was past his retirement date. He just hadn't been able to get a flight home to process out of the Army. He'd served his 20 years. His time was done. And a mission came up, and the commander said, Rob, you don't have to go on this mission. And Rob said, look, I'm here. My guys are going. I'm going. And so Rob, his last mission, after his retirement date, he's technically already out of the Army. Rob gets killed. It is that never quit mentality. That's why we make such a big deal out of Veterans Day. They'll bleed, they'll sweat, they will die before they quit. And that's our veterans, and that's why we put this day on such a high par. And then there's, of course, the story of Pat Tillman. I was there when Pat Tillman was killed. Pat had it all as an NFL football player. He hung up the shoulder pads and put on the body armor of an Army Ranger, and he died on a desert floor in Afghanistan. That sacrifice. So courage, never quit, sacrifice. That's why we make such a big deal out of Veterans Day. And while we celebrate the veterans, we can never forget the families. You may have seen the movie Lone Survivor. That was my unit that went in to rescue those Navy SEALs in a helicopter crash. It's in the movie. It's depicted in the movie. A good friend of mine died on that helicopter crash. Trey Ponder, a bridge is named after him in Franklin, Tennessee. A true volunteer. I was visiting Trey's Facebook page about a year after his death, and I remember seeing the last entry, the last post on Trey's Facebook page had the picture of a little girl about 12 years old, and the post read, I miss you, and I love you, Daddy. It's not only the soldiers that sacrifice. Trey gave his life for our country and for freedom. But that little girl gave her dad. Who will walk her down the aisle someday? All she will ever know of her father are those 12 years she had with him. So you ask me why we make such a big deal out of Veterans Day. It's because of the courage, the never quit mentality, and the sacrifice that the men and women who put on a uniform and serve this country display every day.